So look, I wanted to start with the government's response to the National Mental Health Commission's report, which of course was released in April. So in October, the Minister stated that the government will respond to the review by the end of the year. So I just wanted to know why the government is taking so long to respond to it.
Senator, the government established an expert reference group just shortly after the report was released in April. The expert reference group was established to provide specific advice to the government to inform its response and how it would progress implementation of that response. The group are a very eminent senior group of people who are active in the mental health space. They gave very generously of their time, but there was certainly a lot of material to work through. The first part of their work, which is to provide some advice to government, was completed last month, and the government's response is now in the process of formal government consideration.
Okay, so do we have an accurate timeline of when to expect a response?
Look, the best thing I can say there is the Minister is on the public record as saying that she will be making some significant statements in this space before the end of the year.
Okay. In her recent statements, the Minister's indicated that there will be significant structural reforms. Can you say over what time frame those reforms are going to take place? Will they be immediate or over the 10-year period?
Well,
as further
I think it's premature to speculate on the timing of those. The response is, as I said, it's in the process of being considered by government, and I think the timings for any changes, any structural organisation or reworking of programs or any of those sorts of things are matters for government consideration, and the timing of those as well.
Okay. The report covers the fact, and many other reports, that mental health encompasses many more portfolios than just the health portfolio. So I'm interested to know what's the government going to be doing to ensure cross-collaboration between portfolios?
Yes, Senator, there's an interdepartmental committee that has been established and has been assisting the department in bringing the emerging response into a whole of government context. So it's a central agencies, it's got DSS, Defence, Veterans, education, so it's fully represented. They have been working closely with the department to progress the development of the government's response, and of course it will be subject to a full cabinet process in the near future.
So that level of collaboration and making sure that it's got the cross-portfolio will be covered fully in the response?
That's certainly what we've been working towards, Senator, yes.
Okay. I want to now move on to issues associated with the introduction of the NDIS. And according to the Mental Health Commission's report, there are around 65,000 people with severe mental illness who will fall into the NDIS, but around 625,000 people with severe mental illness who will not. So the general question is what's the government currently, planning about what's going to happen to those 625,000?
Well, Senator, I'll turn to Ms Anderson, who can probably give a more fulsome response there. But I think the important point is that another government department has carriage of this work. We're working very closely with DSS and the NDIA itself to address those transition implementation issues. But I think it is important that detailed questions about the NDIS implementation.
It's not so much the people that are going to fall into the NDIS. I think there are going to be the programs in place through the NDIS for those. But the estimate in the Mental Health Commission's report that's only the 65,000 people. But we've got another 625,000 people who aren't going to be
okay. Well, again, with those, that will be dealt with in the context of the response to the National Mental Health Commission report, and the government's response will have something to say about that.
Senator David Butt, CEO, National Mental Health Commission. Could I just clarify about our review? In fact, we were saying there were 65,000 people with severe and persistent mental illness or psychosocial disability who potentially may get into the NDIS. It doesn't necessarily mean they will. And there's an assessment process that will look at whether they're eligible for Tier 3 or not. So it's not necessarily we're saying 65,000 people will get into the NDIS.
Yes, but it's just the magnitude of it. Only about a tenth of the number of people with 10 times as many with severe mental illness are likely to not be eligible for the NDIS.
Very unlikely to be eligible for the NDIS because they tend to be the people who have got severe and episodic illness. So they are not regarded as having a permanent disability. So no, they are very unlikely. A lot of those people currently would be looked after by state specialised mental health services with support from primary health care.
So would the expectation be that the state would end up having to carry the responsibility for the services for those people?
The states carry a lot of that responsibility now. The models that we've recommended, and obviously it's up to government decisions about what they do, is about taking a more regionalised approach where you're looking at Commonwealth and states working together about how you look after those people, because there is a real issue about that particular group. I mean, a lot of those people, their functional impairment is not necessarily high, so a lot of them are very active in the community, in employment, in education and so forth. There are others who may have, severe and episodic, or they may have sort of severe depression or whatever it might be, who are actually very functionally impaired and who need much greater levels of support. So the recommendations we've made are about a stepped care approach where you match your services to meet the needs of that individual as their care needs go up. So you step up and then you step down when you need less services. I'd say about that group, there is certainly issues about the different roles of the Commonwealth and the states and territories in what care is provided for those people and how you keep them out of crisis and out of hospital. And that's part of the issues that I understand. I know the Commonwealth is looking at, and it's both in the 5th National Mental Health Plan and in its response to the review.
And in particular, in some of those services that I want to move on to, so the services provided under the Partners in Recovery program, and it appears to me in discussions with stakeholders that the future of the Partners in Recovery program is unclear. And I understand that from the 1st of July next year, there are going to be in-kind contributions to the NDIS from the Partners in Recovery. So what is this going to mean for the future of the Partners in Recovery program?
Just two ways of responding to that. First up, just to pick up on a final point that Mr Butt mentioned, and that is in relation to the severe, more complex patients who mental health and their interface between the primary health care and the state health systems. That will very much be part of the 5th National Mental Health Plan. Minister Lee, in April, in fact, at the time of the release of the National Mental Health Commission report, also sought the approval of her state and territory colleagues to commence the development of the 5th National Mental Health Plan. And that will focus on whole of system, Commonwealth, state, territory approach to responding particularly to these important interface issues. That work is progressing well. It's being led by it's being supported by one of the committees of the Australian Health Ministers Advisory Council, ARMAC, and chaired by Michael Pavan, the Acting Secretary of the Tasmanian Health Department. So that work is well progressed. The Commonwealth is both actively contributing to and resourcing that work, and many of those implementation issues that involve a combined Commonwealth state response will be picked up in that piece of work. And certainly in relation to the other issues around where to with Partners in Recovery, activities, day-to-day living, all those sorts of programs, they will also be touched on and addressed within the government's response to the National Mental Health Commission report.
So you aren't able to tell me any more at the moment of what the future of the Partners in Recovery program is likely to be?
Well, it's caught up. It's not caught up. It's part of. I've just told you two stories, and the third story is really the implementation of the NDIS, for which the department does not have carriage of that, but we are actively contributing to that. And I'd certainly recommend that that those sorts of issues be taken up.
But you can
with
understand the
DSS.
concern from the sector.
Indeed.
If there's money being put in from Partners in
Yes.
Recovery into the NDIS, what
Yep.
this means for the Partners in Recovery program.
Senator, just to add to Mr Cormack's comments, a couple of jurisdictions are already engaging in trials which involve Partners in Recovery participating, or their clients participating in the NDIS. So we're stepping into it in a very considered, planned way, carefully looking at the early experience and learning from it, and working closely with the Department of Social Services to ensure that as we move progressively further into transition, we get all the benefits of that early experience and can refine the program as we go. You mentioned the words in kind, and that means that there is that's a precautionary measure, if you like. We are looking very carefully at not moving too many parts too quickly. So we step into the trials and we move beyond trials through transition in a considered way, making sure that, as everyone has in the forefront of their minds, that this client group continues to access the services they need. That is absolutely, has been signed off by all governments as the most important thing to be watched for and protected as we move into implementation.
So when will the future of Partners in Recovery, given the trials that are going on, the pilots that are going on, when will you have more clarity about what essentially what the funding for the programs that Partners in Recovery is currently doing outside the NDIS,
Yes.
what they will end up being?
Senator, we know the sector is very keen for information. Indeed, we are determined ourselves to provide that as quickly as we can. Mr Cormack already referred to the government response to the National Mental Health Commission review, which is material as a timing issue that is within our Minister's control. And we are also undertaking an evaluation of PIR. The final report of the evaluation is actually due next year, in the middle of next calendar year. That would be expected to inform decisions which are made about Partners in Recovery into the future.
So in terms of the areas that currently don't have a Partners in Recovery scheme, is that on hold in terms of extending Partners in Recovery now?
Senator, all of, and this is consistent with the Minister's previous public statements, all Commonwealth-funded mental health programs are now under active consideration in the context of the response to the National Mental Health Commission report, inclusive of Partners in Recovery. So the extent to which the next stages or steps with that program, and indeed any of the other programs, will be part of the government's response to the National Mental Health Commission report, and we're not really in a position to preempt that. But it's not too far away. It's before the end of the year.
Okay, so until that, you can't give anyone any certainty about the timing of decisions on these programs.
What I'm saying, there's a lot of programs in the mental health space. All of them are part of a comprehensive Commonwealth response to the National Mental Health Commission's report, and we can't go through them one by one because they're part of a government response which is under active consideration, and the Minister will be making a statement about that before the end of the year.
Okay. Can you then at least, can I get some clarity about what the current status of in terms of rolling over funds from the Partners in Recovery program and other in-scope programs into the NDIS pool? So where is, just what's currently happening at the moment?
Well, as I said, Senator, the service providers for PIR and in fact day-to-day living as well are participating in trial sites in New South Wales, in the Hunter region, in the ACT here, and in WA, both in an NDIS trial, and also in a WA design trial. And we are contributing in kind, so there is no cash transfer as such. The clients of those two programs, Partners in Recovery and Day-to-Day Living, who are deemed eligible to move into NDIS are continuing to receive those services as NDIS clients. And those are trial sites. Data is being gathered from those sites, is being looked at very closely, and lessons are being derived as appropriate.
Okay. So the other area of funding, or the other programs, the information linkages and capacity building program. Can we be informed about the ongoing level of funding for that program and how much of that funding will be available for psychosocial disability?
So that's within the NDIS, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's a matter for the Department of Social Services and also for the NDIA itself.
Okay. All right. Moving on, away from the NDIS, both the National Mental Health Commission and the Senate Select Committee on Health have recommended a national stigma reduction campaign for mental health. So are you able to tell us anything that the government currently now has planned in terms of stigma reduction?
I'm sorry to repeat my earlier response, but the government and the minister has announced that this is a landmark review. It covers all aspects of mental health programs. The government is in the process of considering its response, and no doubt aspects in that space will be considered and responded to in due course.
Once we get a response.
As part of the response.
Okay. The government talks a lot about frontline services. Can you please explain what is meant in terms of mental health frontline services?
As a general comment, it would be programs that are funded by the Commonwealth that deliver services, that support the delivery of services direct to individuals who may be affected by mental illness, to carers, and also to others who are involved in supporting or working with people with mental illness or at risk of mental illness. So, frontline services would fall into that general description that I've just given.
Okay. So does the government recognise peer-to-peer support as a frontline service?
Yes, I would think it probably would. I'm not deeply familiar with the program, but I'm sure that there's somebody in the room here that is. The extent to which the government is through its programs is supporting the groups that I just mentioned, then that would probably be considered to be, a frontline service.
Okay. So you think it is? Yes.
Well, there's a sort of, there's a common kind of dictionary general understanding of what the term frontline means. There isn't a precise. I think people who are
concerned about peer-to-peer services is obviously some uncertainty as to whether they are considered as a frontline service and want to know whether they are.
Sure.
Just by way of addendum, and I'm not going to reflect directly on the definition, but what I can say categorically is that there is an appreciation of the value of peer-to-peer services. Whether they fall in or outside that categorisation is another question, but we are very aware of the value that individuals with mental illness and their carers place on those services, and certainly we know that there is a strong therapeutic benefit from that sort of relationship.
Okay, and so the value of supporting and resourcing those peer-to-peer services is recognised.
Without making a comment on the definition. Yeah.
Okay. In a recent speech, Minister Lee said it was very important that the consumer remains front of policy mind. So what's the Minister and the government doing to ensure that, again, people with lived experience and their carers are involved in the development of the 5th National Mental Health Plan and the current reforms?
Senator, the development of the 5th National Mental Health Plan is a partnership between the Commonwealth and the States. It's getting underway. There's some good early work, and it would certainly be the Commonwealth's expectation that a 5th National Mental Health plan, as it was the case with the 4th, the 3rd, the 2nd and the 1st, would involve significant engagement with and involvement by consumers, past and present, family members, carers, That's very much part of the way Australia's mental health system does engage, and it would certainly be our expectation that that would be part of the process of developing the fifth national.
So can you give us any more explicit about the mechanisms that will be used and perhaps any differences between this plan and the previous plan?
So just to add a bit of detail to that, there already has been one consultation meeting held, which was held last week with the members of the people who were tasked with writing it, plus also representatives from state and territory organisations of people who have experience or work with people with mental health issues. So there's certainly that consultation being underdone at the moment. We're also expecting to do much more targeted consultation as the development of the plan continues, and certainly a big part of that would be specific consumer carer consultation sessions that we're already planning to undertake as part of that. So yes, there are going to be targeted consultations around that. We also have some representation. The organisation of the group there's a writers group being set up, and there is some consumer representation on people who are actually going to be doing some of the drafting of the plan. So there's very strong involvement of consumer carers within the process.
Has there been a specific focus on this compared with the previous plan? Has it been something that there has been an attempt to have a much more detailed involvement of people with lived experience in the development?
I think that's part of the way that the modern health system is evolving, and mental health is probably in many ways the leader in that area, where it's been a well-established part of policy development, program design and governance, even at a local service delivery level, to have consumers as part of that overall governance arrangement. And I think what Mr Booth has just outlined is a continued development and probably even deeper than the previous iterations of national mental health plans.
Okay, thank you. One last topic, which is on the issue of funding, and given we're obviously in a period of considerable change and uncertainty, is the government planning to roll over funding again for another year, as it's done for the last 2 years while the changes are taking place?
Senator, all aspects of the government's program funding will be considered as part of the response, and we're not in a position to preempt
there are programs whose funding is running out in 8 months' time. I was speaking to a stakeholder yesterday who said that they've got no certainty of funding following.
We're certainly very aware of that, and the government is aware of that, and the government will be providing its response to the National Mental Health Commission's report, and all matters to do with program activity and related funding will be addressed then.
We rolled up in that. Okay.
We'll have to wrap it up. So
this is my very last one. That if at the end of that there are tender processes that are being initiated, what will the government be doing to ensure stability of services and supports during that change?
We're very closely in touch with our partner organisations and stakeholders. We are acutely aware of their individual organisational circumstances and the extent to which they are concerned and are having to make business decisions about their future beyond their existing funding period. We're in active dialogue with them, and we'll make sure that all of those factors are considered as part of the government's consideration of the response to the National Mental Health Commission report, Senator.
Thank you.